Good morning, everybody. This is Jeff, the business guru with Stars on Spotlight. And I've got a very interesting star today. He's got a wonderful story to tell. It's a very important story. So make sure, guys, you listen to the message that's going to come across on this story. The gentleman's name is Anthony Lovell. And Anthony comes from my home country of Australia, but he's up in Central Queensland, where it's beautiful one day and perfect the next, is what they usually say. And he's an endangered wildlife poet. And there's a whole story that comes with that, guys, and he'll tell you that story. And I'm just having a look here. There comes a point in life where you realize you only have 20 years or so to finally follow your passion and leave your mark in the world. So rather than working for a living until you retire, the point came for Anthony in 2021 during the pandemic, while working for the government and private business during his career to date. He'd filled a notebook after notebook with project ideas, and although the trend was towards sustainability ideas, none were backed up enough passion to get any traction. So at this time, upon reflection, he asked his life coach, which is his wife, and we all need one of those guys, to help him clarify his still hidden passion project. So speaking up for wildlife and what came up in return is his first love from his 10-year-old self. In April 21, he started commenting on posts in LinkedIn and turned into poetry and many positive reactions. And in 2022, he got his first commission to write 4 poems for a launch of a digital marketing agency. And that's been continued on, guys. So if you need someone to write some lovely poems for you about Australian and the bush life and all that type of thing, Anthony's your man. And then he goes on, he turned it into, talked about endangered species into a campaign to protect, preserve, and re-establish the biodiversity upon which the community of human civilization depends, right? In other words, guys, he cares, and so should you. He also wants to engage in business to find and promote replacement for business as usual, delivering the world's first anthroponic mass extinction event. And if I got that wrong, he'll tell you. The stakes could not be higher. All right. So his current role is an endangered wildlife poet. His company name, the 1 Million Poetry. And basically it's about being creative. He's done this for quite a while, and raising an awareness for endangered species and critically the importance of biodiversity, guys. He'll tell you a lot more about that. That's obviously a passion of his. His personal motto, and it's an important one, guys: treat the earth as if it was the only century of life. And how true is that, guys? How many endangered species are there throughout the world? So it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Anthony Lovell. How are you, Anthony?
I'm pretty good, but warm here in the middle of winter in Central Queensland. You're making
still
t-shirt weather in shorts.
You're making some people jealous. Where I am, guys, I'm in the Philippines. It's warm all the time. In fact, too warm sometimes.
Yes, you don't even notice winter, do you?
My aircon bill goes through the roof. Anthony, tell us about your journey and what inspired you to start your current career path, my friend.
Well, as you read out, I as a child, my first memories are really of native animals. We had possums on the roof and birds coming into the kitchen to steal sausages and kookaburras and stuff like that. And
where were you in those days?
At Toowong in Brisbane.
All right, wow, on the fringes of Brisbane. Huh? Yeah, lovely area.
Still a lot of forest around in those days, and those birds are still there. My father, until very recently, was still feeding generations after generation of those birds, which he shouldn't have been doing. But anyway, they were there, and they were my first memories. And every weekend, every day after school, I'd be up in the bush, down the creek trying to catch crayfish or lobbies, as we call them.
Yeah, I've done that. Been there, done that. Got a lot of fun.
Trying to catch fish for my aquarium. There was things called rainbow gudgeons in those days that used to catch the very beautiful fish. And just walking up the top of Mount Cootha, which was behind in the bushland, to a lookout up the top there, and obviously get an ice cream at the kiosk while you were there. But that was my first memory. And towards the end of my schooling, I thought I always wanted to be a zoologist, and so I used to read lots of animal books and encyclopedias of animals as I was growing up, and watched things like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. You might remember that. And
David Attenborough, no doubt.
Later on, but he was kind of after I'd been through that age, through that stage. There was other people in those early days. And so I wanted to be a zoologist, but towards the end of my schooling, I also thought maybe I might work in forestry, and had a meeting with the forestry department. But in the end, well, I actually went to university for a little while to do environmental studies until I realised that I wasn't going to pass all the maths in it. And then life started to take a bit of a detour. I found a girl, got married young, had children young. Just fast forward, all those years of just working for a living, not working for any kind of passion, not even doing anything remotely.
Yeah, what we call a job, just on broke normally.
Yeah, whatever it was necessary, and so I would spend some time working for local councils, and then go back and try a little project of my own in the green space.
Awesome.
But it's hard yards in the early days, and then all that led up to the pandemic. So I was on a big arc away from my passion up until the pandemic, and I was one of the, I guess, unlucky ones who got nothing out of the pandemic. I got no support because I was working and living as a caretaker.
Yeah, join the club.
In someone else's home and other homes, and so I kept working every day during the pandemic, except for weekends and sometimes on the weekends too. And for a period of 4 years when I worked in that job, I was getting more and more sort of jaded, I guess, and run down and wondering and spending a lot of time walking around trying to figure out what I should be doing. So that's when I was doing a lot of writing of potential projects in my notebooks.
Yes.
And while I was out getting exercise, and nothing really sort of gave me any traction. Nothing really said, you've really got to put everything into it. And so that was when I had a discussion with my wife and said, you were doing some process recently with someone to try and figure out what their life's passion was. I want you to do it for me. But then again, it could have been that she suggested it to me. I might have changed history there a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Whatever it was.
Sliding doors moment. Yep. Yeah,
we did that. We did this process where she asked me a few questions, and every time I answered a question, it was coming back to, the problems that wildlife were having, and my love for wildlife, which was really, as we thought about it, going back to my 10-year-old self that was up the bush every weekend, looking for animals so that I could see them in their wild and all that sort of stuff. So at that time, I was also looking at LinkedIn. I got onto LinkedIn during the pandemic to see what other people were doing, and I also found when I first started that there were a lot of people who were getting very jaded about what was happening to the environment. A couple of people who were in the environmental industry who were sort of getting very depressed. I was following them and wondering if there was any hope. And so I got hooked into making comments on all the posts that came up about environmental things and all the things we should be doing to try and avert ecological catastrophes. And it was there that I also saw lots of things coming up about wildlife and the alarming depletion of wildlife in the last 50 years. There was a report that came out that said in the last 50 years, we've lost 70% of all wildlife on the earth, 70%.
Wow.
In 50 years.
Wow, my goodness.
And that's not necessarily in terms of species, in terms of the biomass. That's 70% of wild animals that were gone because of, well, the only culprit around to a point of time is human beings. From land clearing, from
forest
climate change that was starting to come up, all those things, the excessive use of pesticides, all the things, plastic pollution, chemical pollution, you name it, it's all impacting wildlife.
Yes.
And so I became very interested in how we can protect the remaining biodiversity that we have. But the most important thing about this, about that was that I realized that my main passion, something I can do all day, every day, and I've got a reason to get up and do it, is write about endangered species to try and raise people's awareness of what's happening and what's at stake. And it can go from, endangered species where there might be a few thousand of them, which means, this means they're still endangered or critically. But when they get
still slight hope.
Yeah, when they get down to smaller numbers, they become critically endangered. And so even now, I only really do mostly critically endangered, because they might have 300 left or 30 left. Or in the case of the vaquita, which is the smallest cetacean, the smallest porpoise in the world, 6 left. 6 left in the wild, which means they're extinct, because they're functionally extinct now.
Yes.
We managed to save the blue whale, which was the largest cetacean, but we could not save the smallest cetacean, because it has the misfortune to live in the Gulf of Mexico, where there is plenty of illegal fishing going on, and they were killed by bycatch, people catching fish illegally. And they'll be gone, in the next couple of years. They'll be gone.
Yeah. Tell me,
that means. Means.
Go ahead.
No, that means that the chain of life that went back to the first cell 3 or 4 billion, 3 billion years ago, whatever it happened to be, is gone. The chain is broken. Then they'll never be around.
If we don't change is going to affect us in the long term, guys. Might not be for Anthony and myself, who are older guys, but for our generations to come, it's going to be completely different from what Anthony and I knew as young boys. Tell me, can you tell us a direction about an important moment in your career that you feel changed your life and the direction that you were going in?
Yeah, well, that was it.
Pandemic?
The pandemic and the clarification of what my passion project was. But following on from that, the next milestone was when I commented on someone who was who had been in advertising and marketing for her career, and was going out on her own, and I commented and said a few things, and she liked my comments, and then she started following what I was doing, and then she liked the poems, and then she asked me to write some poems for the launch of her website, which was the Earth Agency, and I did that, and so I got a commission, and to me that proved that I could actually write poetry that people liked, but was also functional. It was ironically about 4 colours that she'd chosen, and I'm colorblind. Well, I've got red green color blindness, but I still wrote the poems. She still really liked them and still published them, and I've still got copies of those ones. But from there, we kept engaging, and we kept looking at, and then I asked her to develop a website for me, and a branding exercise, and that's where my website came from. So the branding exercise and the 1 Million Poetry website, where I publish. Well, I don't publish all my poems there because it would be too big. The website would be ridiculously big. A lot of my poems are really throwaway to the internet sort of poems. I'll write it in the morning and publish it in the afternoon, and I may do it again with tags, but I've still got records of them. Probably about maybe a tenth of what I write ends up on the website, but usually the ones that have got that get a good reaction from people.
Fair enough.
And there's 50 odd poems on the website.
Awesome. Tell me, in your opinion, what are the key qualities or skills that you believe have contributed to your success, apart from the obvious passion?
Yeah, well, passion is really the fire, the pilot light.
Yeah, the fire in the belly.
It's ready to light the fuel when you've got it. And after I did go back to university eventually as a mature age student, and I studied in 1988. I graduated with Bachelor of Business, majoring in journalism. But the first, there were three sort of pathways in there. It was marketing, journalism, and advertising. So I got a bit of a start in understanding
background,
words and how words can be used.
Yeah, that'd be powerful.
I graduated as a journalist, but I never practiced as a journalist, because one thing it taught me is I didn't want to be a journalist.
Don't blame you.
But in the end, the writing skills were very useful because in the work that I did for local government, I was always writing reports or other things. But that wasn't a passion project. It was just the technical skills of writing.
Yes.
And having a good vocabulary and a good general knowledge and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it comes to writing a poem about, say, for example, a quoll. You know, a quoll is an Australian marsupial that
all right.
was almost extinct in the wild, and and there's a few of them that run up and down Queensland, and in one species in Tasmania. So luckily, you know, I know about a particular animal, and I can usually do a first draft from what I know from my passion in the past of watching all these things like wildlife shows and David Attenborough and Australian wildlife shows and all that sort of stuff. And then I go and do my research to find out, well, what's the most interesting thing about this particular animal, and how does it live, and where does it live, and what are its main threats? And so the poems will often come, you know, the framework will come, and then I go and hang things on the framework to sort of decorate it.
Tell me, how do you stay motivated and continue to innovate in your particular field?
Well, the thing is, it was only 3 years ago when I started writing the poems. And at first
it's been a lifetime's work, though, hasn't it, really?
Well, yeah, it's a combination of it, but it's an entirely different way of using my skills.
Yes.
And I was very reluctant to call myself a poet in the beginning. But someone who liked one of the poems I wrote, and they published it on their website, which was Mojo Streaming, a long time ago. She gave me the appellation of endangered wildlife poet, and I thought, okay, well, if someone else called me a poet, I'm comfortable with that.
That's right, like me being a guru.
Well, if someone calls you that, then
that's right. 50 years of marketing. If I'm not a guru now, when will I be?
Yeah, it depends on your skills and your capabilities. Correct. And all that sort of stuff. And I'm happy to do that. And then a few other poets started following me, and we like each other's work, and we comment on each other's work. So that also made me feel like I had something that is poetic, like poetry anyway. So as I said, I can write poems about anything, but I choose to stick with the environmental theme in relation to trying not to make life extinct on planet Earth.
Fair enough. Tell me, Anthony, can you discuss a recent project or an achievement that you've done that you're particularly proud of?
Well, again, I think it would be, you know, the website. But the website's been running for a couple of years now. So maybe the one that I haven't even published this poem yet. This is kind of different again, but it's the thing about being a poet and writing about things. When it gets too easy, you want a bit more of a challenge to try and go out and do something slightly different. So when I was packing up my father's house, who's now in aged care, and we had to sell his house to pay for his place, and we were going through 60 years of his stuff that had to be thrown away or whatever, I found one piece of my work from university from 1988, one story, one magazine article, and it was about the poet, strangely enough, the poet Kath Walker, or Oodgeroo Noonuccal, as she became later known in his life, an Aboriginal poet who lived on Stradbroke Island.
Wow.
And I went over to Stradbroke Island in 1988, the year of Expo 88 in Brisbane.
I was there for that expo. It was a great expo, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I interviewed her.
Wow.
Strangely enough, I don't even remember why, but in the graveyard on Stradbroke Island, and I had the whole interview.
Awesome.
And it turned out that there were a few corrections from my lecturer, but on the last page, they said, I don't believe this is the same story that you first submitted. This is what you can do when you sit down and rewrite something.
Put your mind to it, yep.
And she said, it was just a really good article, and I got an A for it. It's never been published, but now I'm in the process of trying to find somewhere to get not only the article published, but I've also written a poem, an epic poem about it. Like
lovely.
Ingrid, who runs my website, said it's too long. But the thing is, the story is the story. But the
Yes.
story, the connection is that even back in 1988, she was alarmed at the changes going on the island and the changes in the animals' behaviour and the changes in the seasons and all that sort of stuff, which she thought back then was to do with the ozone layer and pollution.
Yes.
We now know it's climate change, which is kind of the same thing in some ways. But this was 88, and it was the very beginning of, you know, the Indigenous people were saying, look, try and turn this around, because during Expo 88, 𝐒𝐻𝐿 had, in the Australian pavilion, they had the Rainbow Serpent Theatre.
That's right. I remember that. Yep.
And she and her son wrote the script
Wow.
for the Rainbow Serpent Theatre, and the Rainbow Serpent was making an appeal to the wider public of Australia and the wider public that were visiting to go back and respect Mother Earth and respect the animals and respect the trees and respect the rocks, because we belong to them, they don't belong to us.
Yes.
And so to me, when I publish that poem, it's going to be another thing. It's going to be the article, it's going to be the poem, and it's going to be a second poem about the actual script, based on the script of the serpent, what the Rainbow Serpent would be saying today about what's happening.
And I think, and Anthony, in my opinion, being an older guy, I think it's not just the animals, guys. I think people are changing. You know, like Australia's, we've lost all our slang. You know, you remember things like uru, you see uru, you know, all that sort of stuff. My dad used to use, you know, and your dad too, I'm sure. You know, I mean, all these slangs and words, guys, and it's not just Australians, it's all throughout the world. I've been in Asia for the last 12 years, guys, and I've been in the Philippines for a long time, and I see that less and less and less of their cultural shows. Used to be awesome cultural shows, and they've just stopped doing them because the younger generation don't want to take them up. So it's only the older people that are holding it together. And so I think this is all over the world, guys. The world's changing, and I don't think it's for the better. I think it's time we like Anthony's trying to do, it's time we all woke up and you know, treated each other a bit better, and not just the environment, but ourselves. Tell me, Anthony, what advice would you give someone who's aspiring to follow in your footsteps? What would you tell them?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think what I'm trying to do with the poetry and the creative side is show that, I mean, we need to follow the science about what's happening.
Correct.
But science can be dry. And in fact, one person wrote a very influential book that I was reading. He said, I didn't know you could write poems about science and animals and stuff like this. And another person who was a scientist said, this is a great way of presenting science, you know. So putting creativity with science or with a cause is just another way of raising awareness. Like artists have been doing it for a long time. You know, they have art.
Yeah, they express themselves. That's right. Songs, art, books.
Yeah,
the whole gambit, guys.
It's creativity. So recently there was a guy I've been in contact with who is advocating for the mental health of rangers in Africa.
Wow.
Because every day they go out, they risk their lives, you know, not for much money and not for much glory. And he's advocating for these. So last year he asked me to write a poem about rangers and the kind of things that they face. And he gave me some notes, and I did that. This year he actually came back and sent a poem to me that he wrote and asked me just to edit it. And it was great. And for me, that was a very big achievement, because what it meant is that you know, I'm going to be gone one day, but maybe other people have been persuaded.
Well, this obviously resonated very strongly with him, isn't it? Yeah.
The path of creativity is another way of shining a light.
Yeah. Awesome. A byproduct, Eddie, I was just reading a story either today, I can't remember, I read a lot. It was either yesterday or today. I got to think it was last night. I was reading about a man they called Grizzly. He'd gone out somewhere in America there with the grizzly bears for 13 years, right? And he thought they were his friends and rah, rah, rah. And on the 13th year, he and his wife went out, and the grizzly bear attacked them and ate them. You know, there you go. After 13 years, you know, so So, you know, it just, it's an interesting, it was interesting, very interesting story, you know, but, you know, obviously he got the wrong bear, the wrong day, I guess, but, you know, in 13 years of, you know, passion, you know, but, you know, interesting. Looking ahead, what are your goals and aspirations for the future?
Well, again, as I said, pushing those boundaries a little bit. Maybe a bit over a year, maybe a year and a half ago, I did a collaboration with a musician I know in Australia. I really love his work, and he had contributed to a fantastic piece of music called the Jurassica Project, and it was a bit of music that was about the Jurassic period and the extinction of the dinosaurs. And
yes.
And so I said, well, you know, maybe we could collaborate. I could write something, and you could do the video for it, because I'd already done the music. And we worked on it, but we had completely different ideas about what the story should be. So in the end, we managed to get something done, but it wasn't satisfactory for either of us. But we're still in contact, and I intend to go back. I intend to go back and ask him for another piece of music.
Yeah, relook at it and do something else.
Yeah, where I can interpret it, and maybe he can put together about the animals and things like that. Because one piece of one part of it was about life in the ocean, and he's got video with all the whales and sharks and fish and jellyfish, and the music goes with it well. And I'd like to put some words to that.
Lovely.
As well, from my perspective. And that's another thing I did with Ingrid, who I mentioned earlier, who actually just liked the post I saw before today. We did a collaboration where I wrote the words of a trip that she did, a whale watching trip to Norway.
Yes.
She sent me all her notes, and I did a poem as if I was her, as if I was there, vicariously living through her. And the poem, she liked the poem enough so that she could give a video and some of her artwork, because she's an artist, and my words. And we actually did that, a poem called The Whale Boat, which is audio-visual poem.
Wow.
That's probably something that I'd be pretty proud of too, because it was, you know, me doing something remotely. I haven't been out there, haven't been in Norway.
Yeah, I think you should get your story up on LinkedIn a bit more often, Anthony. Anthony, I've got a couple of quick ones for you that come to mind. Being where you are, Central Queensland and that, have you had much to do, because I believe these people respect the land and know it better than what the white man does. Have you had much to do with the Aboriginal people out there at all?
I've been to talk to the local people about doing some poems, you know, about their stories, about their totems and things like that.
Because they seem to know how to live off the land and how to treat the land a lot better than what the white man does. Would you agree?
I do, and I want to put some of those poems in to you know, if you put those things into practice as well. And also, there's some rangers here, some Indigenous rangers who look after the Keppel, Great Keppel Island, North Keppel Island, which are called Konami and Wappa in their language, as well as down towards Gladstone.
Yes.
I'd love to go out with the rangers and just see what, you know.
Yeah, we're lucky to have these sort of people, aren't we? But once again, that's probably something dying out as well. I mean, you've got to love it. It's like a passion. So like a pretty tough existence. The other question I had for you was, and I don't know genuinely, but you may, is there, like the Loch Ness Monster, is a Tasmanian devil something we're never going to see again?
The Tasmanian devils are the smaller creatures that have lost 70% of their population due to a face cancer. But the one you're talking about is the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger. Yeah, which used to be on the Australian mainland as well until about 2,000 years ago, I think it was.
Wow.
There's even some bones up at some caves near Rockhampton of thylacine bones as well as other things. But the thylacine, they believe, is extinct. There are still people who think they see it, who still put videos up there to say that they've seen it. And there's a company that is actually trying to
research
to bring it back from extinction, because they've got some genetic material,
right?
And they want to bring it back from extinction. But that's kind of controversial, because
it's going against the ecological system, isn't it, as such? You know.
But then they'd be released back into a niche, an environment that's changed.
Yes, correct. correct.
And the reason there's no thylacines left is, well, they died out in the mainland for whatever reason, but in Tasmania they were killed off because they were told, the local people thought they were eating their sheep and stuff like that, which was probably wild thylacines.
Yes.
And so the last one died in 1930, I think.
You brought up another interesting subject, because being an Aussie, this intrigues me a bit. What's the story with the dingo? Is the dingo still around, or is endangered, or how's the dingo going?
Yeah, there's plenty of dingoes still around.
Right. And rabbits? We try to wipe the rabbits out with myxomatosis.
Luckily, the rabbits were controlled with myxomatosis, as well as the rabbit-proof fence. A couple of thousand fence to keep them, away from certain parts of Australia. Yes. The rabbits don't seem to be as much of a problem. The problem with dingoes is that a lot of people mix them up with wild dogs, and and they're still hunted and trapped and that sort of stuff.
Pity
what they do to wildlife, to livestock. But on Fraser Island, there's another issue. Or what we used to call Fraser Island, which is now called Gari in the original language. Yes, there are a wild population of dingoes there, and humans coming over all the time and feeding them, and created a bit of a problem because they're getting a bit too bold, and they nip at kids and they nip at adults, and then they get
their own fault. It's their environment. We're trying to encroach on it. Yep.
Yeah, and there's not, on an island like that, there's not much food available to them. So the population grew because of the human population visiting and leaving scraps and things like that. So again, anywhere you've got a problem with wild animals and human and wildlife conflict, it's because the humans are there where they shouldn't be. The wildlife are there first.
Anyway, we're going to wrap this up. Tell us, Anthony, what's the best way for people to continue this sort of conversation, get in touch with you, and maybe have you write a poem for them, or just have a yarn about wildlife, which you're obviously extremely passionate about? What's the best way to contact you?
Well, if people are on LinkedIn, they can contact me there. I'm AE Lovell
as per the screen.
I'm not so active on Facebook, but I still have a profile there, the Anthony Lovell. And on my website is a good one, because at least we know that people have visited the website. Then you can leave a comment on a poem that you liked, and even this morning I had a contact from a marketing person who just moved over here from the US and is looking to make contact with people. And so LinkedIn is my preferred method. But if you want an email, I can give you an email. But otherwise,
no worries. And that website again is www, I assume, the 1millionpoetry.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, because what's going to happen, guys, I'm going to put all Anthony's, been a very interesting guest and a very important subject, guys. I'm going to put all Anthony's socials across LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and of course our YouTube channel. So this is going to reach thousands of people throughout the world, and hopefully it'll have maybe some sort of minor impact. But if you want to know more or have a chat to Anthony, he's a very interesting guy, and he'll tell you about something to help men. A lot of men retire. We spoke about this earlier, Anthony and I. They retire at 65 or whatever the compulsory age is in Australia now, and they're dead within 12 months. They've got no passion. Like Anthony and I both still got a passion. So guys, and there's a group. It's called Men's Shed. Is that right, Anthony?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a group called Men's Shed, and you can reach out to Anthony about that. And it's basically where men go, like the old Men's Shed in the Australian days, for those who know that. And they can have a virtual beer online and have a chat and, network with other fellow entrepreneurs. And hey, who knows what might come of that. So guys, this has been Jeff Veale, the business guru. And don't forget, guys, Stars on Spotlight's going all of July. You've got your chance to come on. A TV commercial, some $30,000. Radio spots going to cost you, for 10 radio spots, going to cost you $3,000 to $5,000. We'll put you across all the social media and make you famous, totally free of charge. So reach out and come on Stars of Spotlights. We'd love to have you as a guest. Any last words, Anthony?
Well, the price is right on that offer, that's for sure. But what I also wanted to mention, the 1 million poetry, you asked me that question, where the 1 million came from. That's from a 2019 report that found that if human beings didn't change trajectory, then up to 1 million species were at risk of extinction, which is kind of a problem, seeing it was animals that created the life support system of this planet. It's wildlife that created the life support system. And if we get rid of them all, then we've got a problem.
Indeed, indeed we have. Indeed we have. Thanks, Sam, for being a wonderful guest.
Thank you.